It was just a touch. Just my wrist. But whatever he did, it stayed in my skin, and now I can't wash it out. My name is Julia. I'm 39. I live in a house with matching spoons and clean counters. I wake at the same time every morning. I fold bath towels in thirds. I remember people's birthdays even when they forget mine. I am the person people say thank you to for remembering the small things. I say it's no problem before they finish the sentence. I'm married to Daniel. He's the kind of man who always does what he says he will, but never more. Steady, predictable, unshakable. The kind of husband who doesn't forget to pick up milk, but does forget I cried during a movie we saw on our third date. We're fine. That's our word. Not passionate. Not broken. Just fine. That kind of fine that starts to feel like silence wearing nice shoes. We have a clean, calm life. 2 sinks. 2 nightstands. 2 people who share toothpaste but rarely opinions. He kisses me goodnight on the forehead. Always the forehead. We don't fight. We disagree gently, the way people do when they've trained themselves out of needing anything urgently. There is no violence between us. Only a quiet, well-dressed absence. The dinner wasn't special. Just another of Daniel's efforts to stay visible in the world of people who care about suits, handshakes, and imported wines. A few colleagues. Their wives. One new hire whose name I forgot immediately. I spent the day preparing like I always do, from a checklist I no longer have to write down. Start the roast. Chill the salad forks. Candlelight, but not romantic. Flowers that look expensive, but aren't. Plates with no visible chips. Music just loud enough to fill the silences, but not enough to interfere with compliments. It's a choreography. One I've performed more times than I can count. Daniel plays host. I curate the comfort. We do this well, together. That night, I wore something simple. Soft navy. Long sleeves. Gold earrings. Nothing too bright, just enough to look intentional. I always wonder if people can tell when you dress not to be seen, but not to be forgotten either. He arrived on time. Not a second early. Not fashionably late. Just correct. Aligned, as if he was reading from a clock we didn't know was ticking. I knew his face. Faintly. We'd met once before, maybe twice. One of those professional events where wives are treated like thoughtful accessories. The kind of nights where you can guess every compliment before it's spoken. He came alone. Held a bottle of wine with both hands. No gift bag. No flourish. Julia, he said when I opened the door. Not as a question. Just a statement, as if he'd already been waiting for this moment. I said his name in return. Slowly, testing it on my tongue. A pause. Then, I'm glad you could come. He smiled, but only with his mouth. There was something in his eyes that didn't follow. Not cold. Not kind. Just present. Sharp in a way that made me suddenly aware of how my dress fit at the shoulders. Daniel appeared behind me, grinning wide. They shook hands. Familiar. Long history. The kind of friendship that's built on things they'll never talk about in front of wives. He stepped inside and looked around, not like a guest. More like someone remembering the details of a place he used to visit in dreams. His presence didn't take up space. But the room adjusted anyway. Dinner was exactly what it needed to be. Laughter. Stories. Wine. Nothing unexpected. I refilled glasses at the right moments. Complimented the new hire's wife on her necklace. Laughed at jokes that didn't ask for understanding. He sat across the table. Quiet, mostly. But when he did speak, people listened. Even Daniel leaned in slightly, a detail I noticed, but didn't know what to do with. I caught his eye once. Not long. Just enough. He didn't look away. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't challenge. It was recognition. Like he'd seen something in me I didn't know had been showing. After the plates were cleared and dessert was passed, I slipped away to the kitchen. Not to escape, exactly. but because I always do. The kitchen is mine. Daniel entertains. I maintain. It's how we work. It's how people like us stay intact. I stood at the sink and let the hot water run over my hands for longer than necessary. The clink of glasses, the smell of lemon soap, the small comforts of repetition. It's always quieter in the kitchen. Not silent, just less performative. The hum of distant conversation floated through the doorway, muffled by candlelight and cordiality. My hands moved without thought, one glass, then another. In my peripheral vision, the towel folded on the counter. I reached for it. And then, his voice hadn't announced him. His footsteps hadn't warned me. But he was there. I didn't hear the door. Didn't hear footsteps. Didn't hear a cough, or a polite clearing of the throat, or the creak of wood under weight. But I knew, before I turned, that I wasn't alone. He was there, leaning casually against the far counter like it belonged to him. One hip pressed lightly into the edge. His sleeves were rolled halfway, deliberate. His hands rested in front of him, fingers interlaced. He looked like someone who had been there for minutes already. Watching, not hiding. I didn't jump, didn't gasp, didn't react the way you're supposed to when someone surprises you in a room you thought was yours. I just turned slowly and said, "I didn't hear you come in." He didn't answer that. Didn't apologize. He looked at me, not directly at my face, but just to the left of it, like he was watching something that hadn't quite formed yet. "I figured you might be in here," he said. His voice was quiet, low, as if he didn't want to interrupt the peace of the room. "I usually am," I replied. Then I smiled, reflexively. Hostess instinct. He nodded, like that made sense. The light above the sink flickered once, just briefly, the way it always does when the dishwasher kicks in. I turned back to the counter, picked up a glass I'd already washed and dried it again, slowly. He didn't move. I could feel him behind me, not close enough to be inappropriate, not far enough to be forgettable. Just there, holding space like it was something he'd practiced. "You always keep your house this quiet?" he asked. "Only when I want people to stay longer," I said, half laughing. He made a low sound, not quite amusement, not quite agreement. Another pause. Then, "You seemed quieter than usual tonight." I turned toward him, towel in hand. "You've seen me before?" He tilted his head slightly, like the question had surprised him. "Enough to notice the difference," he said. There was nothing flirtatious in his tone, nothing that could be called dangerous. But there was a precision to it, a gentleness with a spine. I leaned back against the counter, my hands still working the towel without meaning to. "I'm not usually the loud one in the room," I said. "I didn't mean volume," he replied. That made me pause. I wanted to ask what he had meant, but I didn't, because I already knew. Or at least, part of me did, the part that had been quiet too long, the part that hadn't been touched or looked at in a way that asked for truth, not performance. Behind us, the party murmured on. Laughter. Clinking. A world away. Here, the kitchen held something else. Stillness, but not silence. A pause that hadn't yet decided what to become. I turned back to the sink, half out of instinct, half to breathe. Picked up another glass. This one had a faint smudge near the base, someone's thumbprint. I held it up to the light, examining the way it curved. Human residue. Unremarkable, but intimate in its way. I reached for the towel again. So did he. I don't know if he meant to, or if I did, but our hands didn't meet. His fingers touched my wrist. That's it. Just that. Not my hand. Not my palm. Not my shoulder or waist, or any place storybooks warn you to guard. Just my wrist. A light touch. 2 fingers. No pressure. No grip. But everything in me moved. Not in the romantic sense. Not butterflies. Not heat. It wasn't desire that rose. It was awareness. A low, humming realignment, like a drawer being pulled off its track. A soundless shift. A moment that didn't ring out, but echoed inside, quietly, like a bell you only feel in your ribs. My breath caught. He didn't move his hand away right away. He didn't apply pressure, either. Just contact. Skin to skin. A kind of announcement, but without a voice. And then he let go. Smooth. Immediate. As if nothing had happened. He picked up the towel with his other hand, dried the glass gently, set it beside mine. Smudge is gone, he said. Soft. Simple. Almost kind. I couldn't speak. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because it was the only thing my body knew how to do. He handed me the towel, fingers brushing the fabric only. Then, you should check on your husband. I looked up. He wasn't smirking, wasn't daring me to react. He was just watching me. Calm, even. But behind the calm, something else. Something I wouldn't let myself name. I set the towel down. He stepped away from the counter. Not fast. Not slow. No show. Just a clean departure, the kind that doesn't draw suspicion. At the doorway, he paused, turned slightly, and said, "Thank you for the wine." Then he walked out. The kitchen was very quiet after that. Too quiet. I stood there for a long time, still holding the towel, still standing in the same place. The last glass still wet. I touched my wrist, lightly, as if testing whether it had actually happened. The skin was warm, but not flushed. No mark. No reason to remember. And yet, I already knew I wouldn't forget it. Not the way it looked, but the way it felt. Like something had opened. Not a door. Something smaller. More interior. Something I hadn't known was locked. And now it wasn't. He left before dessert. That in itself wasn't strange. People have early mornings, long drives, quiet excuses made in polite voices. He stood by the door with his coat in hand, offering a thank you that was perfectly timed, perfectly forgettable. He shook Daniel's hand, firm but not emphatic. Said he had a meeting early, somewhere uptown. Then he turned to me. He didn't say goodbye like the others did. No cheek kiss. No handshake. No charming final joke. Just a quiet look. 1 second. Maybe 2. And then he was gone. The house emptied slowly after that. One by one, the laughter faded. The coats disappeared. The thank yous grew mechanical. I nodded, smiled, tilted my head in that gracious, I'm a good hostess angle I'd learned from my mother. By the time the last door closed, I could feel the imprint of my own smile lingering behind my eyes like something sore. Daniel disappeared into the living room, already reaching for the TV remote. He called something over his shoulder. A compliment, maybe, or just a sigh. I don't remember what he said. I only remember that I didn't answer. I stood in the hallway and stared at the front door. Not because I wanted him to come back, but because I needed to believe something had actually left. I cleaned like I always do. On autopilot. Put dishes in the washer. Wiped counters. Refolded napkins no one had touched. Daniel asked if I needed help. I told him no. He went upstairs. I heard him brush his teeth. I heard the closet door open, then close again. Drawers. Hangers. The rhythms of a man preparing for rest. I was still in the kitchen, rinsing a glass that was already clean. It was the one he touched. I hadn't set it aside on purpose. Not consciously. But there it was, sitting to the left, slightly farther from the others, like it had drifted out of order. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked it up. The smudge was gone, of course. The glass was clear, smooth, harmless. But I held it too tightly. Not with force. With something like reverence. Or suspicion. Then, slowly, I pressed it to my wrist. right where he'd touched me. I don't know why I did it. It didn't match. The glass was cold, detached, lifeless. His fingers hadn't been. They'd been warm, measured, intentional. And the feeling the after was still there, like static under the skin. I pulled the glass away and set it down too gently, as if dropping it might wake something. Then I turned off the light and stood in the dark kitchen, my hand curled into a fist against my side, wrist pulsing lightly. That night, I didn't sleep. Daniel's breathing settled quickly beside me, slow and even, his body curled toward the edge of the bed like always. I lay facing the ceiling. The dark was thick, silent. My wrist itched. Not in a literal way. Not on the surface. It felt aware. Like the skin there had developed its own memory, its own sense of time, separate from the rest of me. I lifted my hand and brought it to my chest, just under my collarbone, cradling it like something fragile. I told myself it was nothing. A touch, barely contact, a flicker, a non-event. But still, I couldn't move my arm away. Not for hours. The next morning, Daniel was already dressed. He kissed my head, told me he had meetings back to back. Asked me to remind him to pay the water bill. I nodded. Made coffee. Toast. He left. The front door closed. And the stillness was immediate, but not peaceful. I stood at the kitchen sink again, cradling my mug, my eyes locked on the counter where he'd stood. There was no trace. No note. No object. No scent. And yet, I could still feel it, not in the air, but in the shape of the room. Like the space had been altered and no amount of organizing could undo it. I pressed my fingers to the inside of my wrist again. Soft. Still warm. Still humming. I tried to make the day normal. Laundry. Emails. A call with my sister I barely listened to. I folded towels while the news whispered in the background. I swept the kitchen floor twice, even though it was already clean. But everything I did felt around the feeling, not through it. I kept looking at my hands. Every task became a way to avoid that spot. That small, unremarkable patch of skin that felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. By late afternoon, I gave in. I went upstairs, drew a warm bath, and sat in it longer than usual. My wrist stayed above the water for a while. I stared at it, waiting. Then, slowly, I dipped it in. Nothing changed, but I scrubbed it anyway. Not harshly, just enough. A small cloth. Gentle circles. No soap at first, then too much. I rinsed. And when I lifted it again, it looked the same. Of course it did. That was the problem. Daniel noticed nothing that evening. We had dinner. Leftovers. He asked about the mail. I asked about his boss. We passed each other sentences like napkins folded, clean, and devoid of heat. He touched my shoulder once when he leaned past me. I flinched. He didn't notice. I told myself I was imagining it, that it had nothing to do with that moment, that I was just tired. But the flinch, it wasn't fear. It was contrast, because his touch felt like it had always felt gentle, familiar, safe. And that's what made it unbearable, because my body knew it wouldn't leave a mark. And somehow I missed the weight of the one that did. That night, I lay awake again. This time I didn't face the ceiling. I curled into myself, wrist tucked against my mouth like a secret I couldn't let go of. I didn't cry. It wasn't grief. It was something worse, something unnamed. The ache of something uninvited that still made space for itself inside you. And the worst part, I couldn't name what had been taken, only that it had. The next day, I wore long sleeves. The weather didn't call for them, but I needed the fabric, needed the barrier, not to hide a bruise. There wasn't one. That would have been easier. Proof is comforting, even when it hurts. But this? This was just absence. Presence followed by disappearance. Contact without consequence, except the kind that lived in the body and refused to leave. I stopped using that towel, the one we reached for together. I folded it, placed it under the others, and when Daniel asked where it went, I said it had a stain. He didn't ask what kind. He never does. It's strange, what we remember. The words, the actions, they blur. But the moment? The feeling of the moment? It stays. Pressed into the muscle. Woven into the tissue. He hadn't said anything wrong. He hadn't lingered. He hadn't taken anything, not visibly. But he'd left something inside. And now I carried it everywhere. Even in silence. Even in front of my husband. Especially there. It's been 3 weeks. 3. Long enough that no one talks about that night anymore. Long enough for the wine bottles to be recycled, for the extra chairs to be stacked in the garage again, for the hand towels to be washed and folded and used without ceremony. Daniel doesn't remember the guest list anymore. Doesn't mention the man who left before dessert. I pretend not to either. But my body remembers. There's a moment when someone reaches for you, just casually, just with kindness, and you realize you've gone too long without being touched in a way that didn't cost something. It happens at the grocery store. The cashier brushes my hand as she gives me change. I drop a coin. It clangs too loudly against the tray. Or when my sister hugs me goodbye after brunch. She leans in, her cheek against mine. And I stiffen. Only for a second. But I feel it, that thread pulling taut under my skin. Like a whisper only my body can hear. And Daniel. God, Daniel. He touches me more now. Not with hunger, not with force, just with routine. His hand on my back when I hand him coffee. A kiss on the temple before work. Fingers brushing my hip as we pass in the hallway. Each one lands like paper. Soft, innocent. But every time he reaches for me, I feel something twist. Not because it hurts, but because it doesn't. Because his touch slides off me like water. Leaves no shape. No dent. And the place on my wrist, that small, unscarred, unforgettable place, still aches in a way his hands never reach. Some part of me started avoiding mirrors. Not deliberately. Just. Slower to pass them, less willing to stop. I don't like what I see in them anymore. Not because I look older, but because I look vanished. Something about my face has pulled inward. My eyes scan for something, then blink it away. I still do my makeup. Still wear earrings. Still answer the door with a smile that feels rehearsed but looks real. But underneath? Underneath, I don't know where I went. And I don't know how to come back. I started keeping my sleeves long even on warmer days. Not because I need to hide anything, but because I can't bear the sight of that skin. It's clean, smooth, pale, exactly the way it should be. And that's what unsettles me most. Because nothing shows. Not the way the breath caught. Not the way my ribs folded and when his fingers brushed that one place. Not the stillness after. There is no mark. No proof. Only sensation. Only the knowledge that something passed through me, left no damage, and still it moved everything. Sometimes at night, I lay in bed and try to name it. What it was. What he took. What he gave. Was it power? No. Not exactly. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't even seduction. It was recognition. That's the word that won't stop circling. Recognition. Like he saw something in me I had spent years keeping hidden even from myself, and with one touch, he pulled it to the surface. Gently. Without asking. And then walked away like nothing had happened. There's a weight to being seen like that. Especially when it's fleeting. especially when it isn't followed by anything obvious. Because what do you do with that? You can't accuse. You can't confess. You can't even explain. It's not a story you can tell. What would I say? That a man touched my wrist for less than 2 seconds and now I flinch when my husband hands me the TV remote? That I scrubbed the spot for days and it still feels like it hums? That I wonder constantly if anyone else has ever felt this? If he's ever done it before? If he even remembers? One night, Daniel touched my face. We were in bed. Lights off. Silence thick. He rolled toward me, brushed a hair from my cheek, said my name, Julia. Soft. I didn't answer. He asked if I was okay. I said yes, because that's what I'm supposed to say. Because there's no box for this. No diagnosis. No acceptable grief. What would I even tell him? That I'm not hurt, but I'm not whole? That someone touched me like I was a page in a book he'd already read. And still he wanted to feel the texture again? That it wasn't about lust? It wasn't about love? It was about possession. And not even of my body. Of my silence. I haven't seen him since. Of course not. That's part of the design. He was never meant to stay. He was meant to pass through. To drop something into me like a coin in a well. And now I carry it. A soundless ringing at the bottom of everything. Some days I imagine running into him. By accident. On a sidewalk. At a store. And what I'd say. Nothing, probably. Just a glance. Maybe a nod. But I know my eyes would betray me. Because when you carry something that no one else can see, and you finally lock eyes with the person who put it there, the body remembers. Even if the lips don't speak. Even if the moment never reaches the air. Today, Daniel handed me a letter. Something from the bank. Our fingers brushed. Lightly. And I flinched. He noticed this time. Asked, "Did I startle you?" I shook my head. Smiled. No. Just tired. And he believed me. Because that's what we do. We let each other believe the small lies, the safe ones. The ones that keep the house quiet and the dinners warm and the calendar moving. But inside me? Inside, the story never stops. It doesn't need events. It only needs memory. Memory of the smallest contact. 2 fingers. 1 wrist. A single breath between 2 people who didn't ask for anything, and still, something happened. Not a breaking. Not a betrayal. Just a movement. Quiet. Permanent. Unprovable. Some people leave bruises. Others leave silence. He left something in between. And now I flinch. Not because I'm afraid, but because part of me still listens for him in the air. Still checks the mirror for the version of myself he saw. Still waits for a second touch that will never come. I touch my wrist now only in the dark. 2 fingers. Light pressure. And I whisper to the skin like it might remember. Some touches don't stay on the surface. They live. And they don't wash out.